And of course, that has consequences. That has consequences for the share the link. I know some of you in the United States are beginning to prepare for Thanksgiving, and some of you, like myself, have to travel. I am far away from where my
live on forever. And love one another. Oh, yeah. Living and loving and sharing, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
We are tonight. The topic of the program tonight is that the PPP is governing like thugs. They're governing like thugs. It is the title of my column in Village Voice this weekend. And I am making the point that these people are governing like thugs. And of course, that has consequences. That has consequences for the larger politics. Look, there are some developments that we've got to pay attention to. One development is that more and more people are who enabled the PPP last year. Many of them helped to put the PPP into office. And some of them have now begun to come out against the PPP and what they're doing. The most recent, of course, is former ambassador. He was in charge of Go Invest during the PPP time in office. Jeff De Silva came out. Today's Stabrook News reports that former PPP government official Geoffrey De Silva has expressed concern that the current administration is proceeding on the same corrupt trajectory as its predecessor. De Silva, who has written a series of letters to the press in recent months on a wide range of topics, including good governance, corruption, race relations, and the oil economy, cited a number of troubling occurrences in a missive yesterday to Sunday Stabrook. Among those were that under the current PPP government, the beneficial owners of the Kanji and Kaitro oil blocks have not been revealed, and the review of the Piara oil project has not been published. He said that a new company whose owner is related to a very senior official has been given infrastructure contracts. De Silva, who served for a long period under the PPP as head of Go Invest, noted that some procurement bids were withdrawn and resubmitted a number of times. He did not cite a specific example, but this has occurred in the agriculture sector with sheep islands. De Silva also served as Minister of Trade. He said that contracts have been awarded to unqualified persons with political connections. The last Sunday, Stabrook carried a report on the continuing questions surrounding the award of a school building contractor company comprised of a DJ and football promoters. De Silva, who had a stint as Guyana's ambassador to Venezuela, also contended that some political appointees have been hired based mainly on party loyalty and not also on merit. That is, their integrity, ability, talent, effort, and achievements. Pointing out that it is challenging to direct and prove corruption, De Silva listed some red flags that will help to detect corruption. He says a purchase order or contract is awarded to a particular supplier or contractor who does not have the experience, the required facilities and resources. 2, some legal requirements and regulations are bypassed. 3, goods and services are purchased that are not necessary or appropriate for the institution to successfully function. 4, goods or services are not delivered or they are substandard. 5, there are no documents to support unusually high fees, commissions, and other expenses. 6, the supplier or contractor is urgently requesting advance cash payments. 7, a supplier or contractor wants payments to be made to a person or company other than his or her company. 8, there are close connection links through family members, relatives, friends, and associates between a particular official and the supplier or contractor who insists that other staff should not be present in meetings to discuss the contract. 9, some qualified supporters and contractors are not chosen because of their race, ethnicity, gender, age, or class. 10, expenditures for travel expenses and hospitality are not backed up with receipts and other support. He went on, the priority for Parliament's Public Accounts Committee should be to promote the passage of the existing draft legislation to reward whistleblowers and protect them from unjustified retaliation. The perception of hypocrisy on fighting corruption is a powerful instrument that could make or break a government. This is Jeffrey De Silva, who is alerting the rest of us. These red flags under the party that he was once a member or supporter, but he worked for them. And he is now drawing to our attention that corruption, especially as it relates to contracts, is rife under this government. He's drawing our attention to what's happening with the distribution of the oil blocks, the awarding of this oil block, the secrecy surrounding these oil transactions, these blocks. Who are the people? We don't know. Remember when the coalition did not make public how much it got from Exxon as startup money? Remember what happened? Oh, it's a big hue and cry. And now this government is doing worse. We had Mr. Christopher Ram on last week. Mr. Ram said, the government is not interested in good governance in the oil industry. He said the government is overplaying its mandate. He condemned the government for the pittance that is given to public servants. The Kaito News is crusading against the government and its handling of the oil industry. Mr. Chris Ram talk about the inability to audit, to do that audit on the $9 billion. We have Schumann, the deputy speaker, coming out against the government on a whole host of issues. And what is the significance of these people coming out? Our first response is going to be, well, we don't want to hear from them because they help to put the government in power. They have to put the government in power. So we don't want to hear from them. I would advise against that. It is important for us to hear from them because they help to strengthen our case. We've been saying from day one that the PPP is a corrupt government, that it's a government that doesn't concern about any rule of law. We have been saying it now. People from within their camp, or some of these people may argue that they're not in their camp, but they supported them. They supported them coming to power. And now 15 months later, these people are coming out against them. Another one, Alan Fenty, who writes a Friday column in the Stabrook News. Every week, Alan Fenty for the last year has been bigging up this government, has been talking about how the election was rigged by the PNC and this government is the best thing since sliced bread. In his column this past Friday, he says, my simple question for myself and all citizens interested, is the 15-month government showing any gratitude? Let me read that. Alan Fenty, who helped use this column to help put this government in power, been defending them. Here is what he wrote on Friday. I quote him, the piece was coincidental with my thought processes assessing how the Ali Jagdeo victors are showing regard for international support garnered last year. My simple question for myself and all citizens interested is this: is the 15-month government showing any gratitude? Does it have to? Continue with Fenty. Put another way, my wonderment is grappling to process whether the PPP, as it goes about consolidating authority, then power, is conscious about how CARICOM and the wider geopolitical world is assessing its stewardship since the 2020 solidarity extended. Now, note, he says CARICOM and the geopolitical world gave the PPP solidarity last year. We know it was more than solidarity, but Mount Open Story jump out. And he's admitting that international forces helped the PPP to come to power. Now, we have been saying that. Now their own enablers are saying it. And they feel the PPP doesn't care. It got CARICOM support. It got the wider geopolitical world support. And now it's consolidating power. So, Fenty, De Silva, Truman, Chris Ram, and many others, after 15 months, they're realizing what we did last year might have been a mistake. No, they're not saying that. They're not saying it's a mistake, but they're saying the government is not governing properly. That is why I say that this government is governing like a set of thugs. Thugs don't care who helped them and who didn't help them. All they care about is to wreak havoc, and what the outcome is going to be, let it be. That's how thugs operate. Thugs don't reason. Thugs don't concern whether you're friend or family. The PPP is engaged in thuggishness, has been engaged from day one. It spent the first couple of months in power, chasing down Lowenfield and all people at GCOM, charging them, jailing them. It called out soldiers and sent them to West Bobis against people protesting. It covered up the murder of those boys. Is that let loose the SWAT team. It is engaging in economic violence against public servants, other people who they perceive to support the opposition. When you give public servants a 7% increase, it is really a decrease. It's a minus zero. That is economic violence against public servants. When you give $250,000 to a set of workers who support you and give nothing to other workers who don't support you, that's economic violence and economic thuggishness. Only a thug will be conscious of the ethnic environment that we live in, will be conscious that people are charging them of racism, and yet in the face of those charges, you're going to give $250,000 to one group and give zero to the other group. That is economic thuggishness. Only a thug government would decide not to audit $9 billion and let money go down the drain like that, because they are front companies. You heard De Silva, he went through, he said these are the red flags. The PPP got front companies in the oil industry. That is a small place, and we know that. Then he said, you're right, I forgot Chris Glenal, who turned this paper, used this paper to help to defend the PPP and bring them to power. Glenal is still my partner, but he parted company with me and Lincoln because we did not go along with the narrative that the PPP won the election. He stuck out. his paper neck for the PPP. No, he's crusading against the PPP. Their own enablers. Forget about we. They can say we are anti-government. Their own enablers. The Stabrook News, which up to this day refuses to carry any critique of the 2020 election that is not in line with their view that the PPP won the election. They're running editorials now every week, criticizing the PPP for what it's doing. Look at the sluggishness that the PPP has engaged in for 15 months. And these entities, these persons, they enabled the PPP to come to power, and they were muzzled. They're accusing the opposition of saying the PPP was installed. It's not the opposition who said the PPP was installed. The word installed was used by the American State Department. And we know that the Americans helped enable the PPP to come to power. And it's they who said it was an installed government. Because they know something about politics. When you have an election that is was as contested as the 2020 election, where both major parties said we have evidence that the other one's thief. It's a contested election. And the Americans know that any government that arises from a contested election is an installed government. It's not an elected government. The Americans knew that. They know that. But the Americans' position is that we do what we have to do. We help a government to power that we feel is going to look after our interests better. But we know that's an installed government. But if Kaito News and Stabrook News and all the others would have us believe that this was a legally elected government. It was not. It's not. An elected government comes out of elections in which both sides agree that the government was fairly elected. All the anomalies, all the thing that came out of the recount, it's there, the evidence is there. GCOM has the evidence. Why do you think Nandalal, in his so-called electoral reforms, no reform about the voters list, no reform on people who live outside and can vote in Guyana's elections, no reform about multiple voting, no reform about people who are working on election day and how they vote. You got 20 people in a district who are working on election day, but you get 50 of them vote. Where did the extra 30 come from? None of those things Nandalal dealt with. All the anomalies that were unearthed during the recount, none of those. What is the penalty? Nandalal What is the penalty for somebody in charge of a polling station and there is no statutory document in the box? What is the penalty for that? Nandlal didn't put that in his electoral reform. The police said people who voted were not in the country. What is the penalty for that, Anil? No, Anil didn't deal with that. Anil not interested in that. Anil decided that the PNC people are accused of certain electoral crimes, and he wants to pass legislation to give life sentence for these crimes that he said the PNC people carry out. What about the crimes that your people are alleged to have carried out? What about the 47 boxes? What is the penalty to have boxes without statutory document? Those boxes weren't found in Buxton or Pleasance or Golden Grove or Anns Grove or Denhamstel or Belladrum or Oaktown. They were found in One Repose and other areas that are partial to you, Anil Nandalal. No, those are not crimes. So in an election in which both sides said we have evidence of fraud, how can you award that election to a government, to a party, sorry, one of the parties, and say it's free and fair? The Americans got it right. The Americans agree we gave the election to one of them, but the government was not elected. It was installed. The Americans are straight up. All the others said the government was elected. And their elected government, they're now saying is corrupt. Their elected government, they're now saying they're not engaged in good governance. No. We've been saying that before the elections were called. We were saying once you have a contested election and you award it to one side or the other, you are giving that side license to do whatever they want, because they are going to say, the Americans say, we are the right governors. The Chamber of Commerce said we are the right governors. Chris Ram said we are the right governors. Stabrook News say we are the right governors. Kitron News say we are the right governors. The Commonwealth said we are the right governors. CARICOM say we are the right governors. The Canadians say we are the right governors. And since all of them say we are right, it means the other side is wrong. And we have a wide mandate. Never mind we got 50% of the vote. We get 100% of the power brokers. The PPP then sees its mandate not from the 50% that they said they get. The mandate came from the fact that important voices, important regional organizations, important international organizations said they win. And if the Americans and Canadians and Europeans and CARICOM and Commonwealth and OAS say we win, then we get 100% mandate. And any government that perceives itself having such a wide mandate is going to govern like thugs. No regard for the law, no regard for the opposition, no regard even for the people who helped them to get into power. No regard for anybody. Insensitive, thugs. And so what they did, the international community, CARICOM, the Chamber of Commerce, the media, what they did last year is that they helped to install a sub-government, and then they enabled them for an entire year. And now, like Judas, some of them, they're pretending that all the things that the government is now doing, it's based on some bad governance. No, it's not. The logic of installing a government in an election that was so contested is what you get now. The hatred for people like me, Lincoln, Lewis, the hatred for us by the PPP and their enablers is that we were critical of the coalition. We were. We supported the coalition. My party was part of the coalition. But I'm not a political thug. Which means that if I see wrong, it doesn't matter whether it's a government that I support. If I see wrong, I will call it out. And I did that. And the coalition punished me. They punished Lincoln. But when it came to the election and we saw what was happening, we said, no, we are not going to go along with your narrative that the coalition rigged the election. In my case, I said, let me wait and see the evidence. At one point, I said, look, you all don't worry about this election. Just call this election off. I used the flowery language. I said, discard those boxes. What I meant was, look, you all forget about this election. Call it a draw. And you all form an interim government. Let it run for 3 years. I suggested that Granger should be the president and whoever the PPP should be the prime minister. They cussed me out for that, but I didn't care who was the president or the prime minister. All I was saying is that you have a joint government. And let the joint government repair the country. The PPP by itself can't repair the country. The PNC by itself can't repair the country. If they could have done it, they would have done it. One was in there for 28 years. The other was there for 3 years, for 23 years. The other one come back for 5 years. And they've not repaired the country. So try something new. And you all have an opportunity now. Because both of you all say the election thief. So forget about the election, call it a draw, or an inconclusive election. GCOM has the authority to do that. That is what Lowenfield recommended. He said after the recount, all the anomalies I see, I can't determine a winner. So Vincent said, I said, well, if there's no winner, call it a draw and put both of them, give them half and half, the government. And together, you all repair the country. You all repair the elections machinery, repair the police force, do it together. So there's no issue here of discrimination. You all determine how much together, determine how much public servants must get, repair industrial relations. That's what we ask for. To this day, I have not said the coalition won. I was a candidate for the coalition. Many coalition supporters believe the coalition win, right? That's them. I don't have a problem with people believing that the party win. But I don't know who win. The election was inconclusive. The recount order showed clearly that the PPP was engaged in shenanigans before election day. The recount order established that. The court decided not to use it, and they said, let it go to a petition. The court was being disingenuous. Because when the PPP said they see Mingo do something, Mingo mistabulate, he use spreadsheet. When they went to the court should tell them, as they would normally would tell parties, come back to us with a petition. But no, the court entertained the PPP. And that is what caused the 5 months. It's not the coalition that caused the 5 months. If a party see rigging in our system, that party wait until after the election and use it as an evidence of petition. That's how we operate in Guyana and the English-speaking Caribbean. No, the PPP said they saw rigging and they went to the court. And the court initially said, go back and correct what you're doing, what you see wrong. The court tells you, come, correct what you see wrong. Mingo changed what he was doing. The PPP and his henchmen then invade the commission office, and at that point they break the election up. They broke up the election. The question is why they break up an election that they were so certain that they had won and they had seen thieving. They break up the election and then go to court, and the court entertain them. And then Granger allow them to suck him into the recount order. Recount, they allow him to, they suck him in. His own people tell him don't go down that road. Because there were 10 results from the 10 regions, which had to go to GCOM for validation. But Granger went along with the recount order. He should not have. But the recount order threw up the unexpected. The recount order showed the PPP rigged before election day. The court then, instead of using that recount results to arrive at a determination, they decided not to. No, I'm an institution man. And so, one has to go along with what the court ruled, but I think the court acted badly. They did not read the political situation, or they ignored it. You see, the law doesn't exist in a vacuum. It doesn't. The law doesn't exist in a vacuum. The law is part of the wider society. And the court, being conscious of a disputed election, should have acted differently. I disagree with the court in that way. The appeal court made the fundamental point that so long as you had a recount and the recount had certain rules, then you are changing the meaning of a valid vote. A non-valid vote is usually a spoiled vote. But now the recount order was saying a non-valid vote is much more than a spoiled vote. Because you're going into those boxes to figure out how the votes got into the boxes, what kind of votes they are in the boxes. And you went into the boxes and you're saying, in effect, that votes in a box with no statutory documents cannot be valid votes. Votes in a box by people who were not in the country on the day of voting is not a valid vote. And the appeal court said, valid votes, the recount order changed the meaning of a valid vote. The CCJ disagreed. I'm saying they all were enablers of the PPP coming to power. The Americans were the only honest one who said, we helped them to come to power, but they're not elected. They were installed. All the others said, oh, the court said they win. The court did not entertain all the evidence at its disposal. The court did not entertain the evidence of the recount order. Did not. It did not. The court ruled on forms, not essence. And so they installed a thug government. Thug government. And the PPP is governing now like thugs. And some of them, like my friend Chris Ram, like Mr. De Silva, like Danlal, like Schumann, at least they've decided to come clean and said this is a set of thugs that we have helped to put. Now they haven't walked back their narrative that the government was elected. They haven't walked that back. But they're saying this elected government is behaving like thugs. So where does that leave us? As I said, do not shun these people. They're helping our case. They're helping our case. This is what we've been saying. And now their own people are saying it. So we need to hear those people. We need to hear them. Let them say it loud and clear. Because they're helping to make our case. So that's the first thing you need to do, we need to do. Don't send them. I will invite them on this program. Let them come here and let them critique the PPP on this program. They're helping our case. So that's the first attitude change I want to recommend this evening. Yes, cost them that they help to put the PPP in power, but recognize that this is 15 months later. And at least they're coming out. And if they're coming out, we must help them to come out more. No. Thugs are violent people. I said, look at the economic violence that has been unleashed on supporters of the opposition. Look at the economic violence. Don't say the government don't have money. The government borrowing left, right, and center. And they get $250,000 they can give to sugar workers. Rice farmers, they give them must be more than $250,000. Some of their own people said there was corruption in the money they give to the rice farmers and other agricultural workers, other farmers who were impacted by the flood. They give them more than $250,000. So you give rice farmers more than $250,000, you give sugar workers $250,000, and you give the other side nothing. That's economic violence. It's also economic violence that's operating within an ethnic context. It's ethnic economic violence. Most of the public servants are Black people, teachers, nurses, policemen, and women. People working in ministry, they're already the lowest paid. The average salary for a public servant is below the average salary for a cane cutter. No, I'm not against cane cutters getting more money, getting better wages. But when you're giving them better wages and you're giving the other side starvation wages, something is wrong. And what is wrong is that you are engaging in ethnic violence against a major ethnic group in your country. You're not meeting with the public service unions. You're not meeting with the GTU, the GPSU. They've been calling on you to meet. You have not been meeting. But since a couple of sugar workers come out on the road, you're calling God, we'll meet with them and settle it next day. Oh man, oh, you got shame. You know, say, oh God, if me do this, people like David Hinds and them gon call me out on it. We can't be so barefaced, man. Let me give them a little 15%. David Hinds ain't gonna quarrel about that. But 7% he gonna quarrel. They got shame. They don't care. They don't care. Because they're thugs. No. Let me deal with this question. Thugs govern by violence and they provoke violence. The PPP must know that they're dealing with human beings. They must know that bucket a go well one day, bottom go fall out. Bob Marley in the song I Shot the Sheriff, he said, I was going out of town one day and I saw Sheriff Brown and I know he will shoot me. So I shot first. I shot the sheriff. And if I'm guilty, I will pay. The PPP must know that there is a limit to what people can take. But Bob again say, ain't no rules now. No bullet can stop me now. They must know. And yet they are doing what they're doing, which means their intention is to provoke violence. You see, violence is not just the naked physical violence. It's the promotion of violence through your policies. You're frustrating people. Look how opposition supporters beating up on their leaders. Quite rightly. The PPP is provoking violence. They want the opposition side to get so frustrated that they will engage in violence. They want that. Because they will then say, we are the victims. They will then hold up East Indians to say, look what them black man do to you. And are you want to attack what we doing? Look what them black man, they're provoking violence. Let me make it very clear. I'm against violence. I've studied ethnically divided societies. And I've seen what ethnic violence does to communities, to countries. Look at the Palestinians and the Israelis. Never ending. Never ending. Look at the violence between Pakistan and India. Never ending. Look at the violence in the Sudan. Never ending. Look at the long violence between in Ireland there. When you study ethnic violence, it's one of the worst forms of violence in the world. One of the worst forms of political violence. It ain't got no rules. Societies can recall our own country had our ethnic violence 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And we haven't recovered from that. And that wasn't a large-scale violence. It wasn't at the level of the Palestinians and Israelis. So I am against violence, and for those who think that I have something to say, I want to urge us that violence is not the way to go. Violence is not the way to go. But if you are the victim of violence, what do you do? I'm against violence. But if my supporters are the recipient of violence, economic violence, physical violence, police violence, must I allow my fear of violence, my opposition to violence, Must I allow my opposition to violence to turn me into a coward in the face of violence? You know what? To give you a quotation. And the quotation goes like this. If I have to choose between violence and cowardice, I will choose violence. You know who says so? Not Marx. Mahatma Gandhi. The Prince of Nonviolence said, if I have to choose between violence and cowardice, I will choose violence. I am not for violence as a solution. I'm opposed to it. I explained just now why. It consumes all of us. At the end of the day, people may win small victories. I'm from a village that the set of violence between 2002 and 2006, and the world, Guyana and the world, are yet to understand how that violence has destroyed my village, the impact. We are rebuilding our village. Those 4 years of violence has done untold destruction. The raping of women during those 4 years, unspeakable. And nobody, not the government, not the supporters of the gunmen, nobody has come back to that village and said, how can we help in post-war Buxton? Because it was a war on our soil. By external forces. The gunmen didn't originate in Buxton, and then the government sent in their phantom to deal with the gunmen, and our village became a graveyard. To this day, we have not fully recovered. The first time I'm speaking openly on that thing. And I, along with Kwayana and Andaye, were the only 3 Black leaders who, when Indians were being killed, they passed through Buxton, they beat them, some of them came. We were the only ones who couldn't condemn it. Does the PPP remember that? Oh no, Kwayana is the biggest racist. David Hinds is more racist than Kwayana. We who defended the Indians when they were under attack. So what I study and what I see about ethnic violence, I do not wish that on my country. But like the Mahatma, if I had to choose between cowardice and self-defense, because if you are responding to the violence of the state, you are doing so in self-defense. So, I think the time has come to defend ourselves. No violence. No violence. The objective of our self-defense must not be violence. It must be freedom. Let the violence come from those who they got violence on the brains. And they usually want to goad us, they provoke us. So when we respond in self-defense, they say, you see, it's violence. But Marley said, he who live to live, he who fight and run away lives to fight another day. What it means that you got to fight smart. You don't fight to get killed today. The hotter the struggle, the sweeter the victory. That's what Brother Bob said in the song Jamming. Or he's in one of the two. So, I think it's time for self-defense. We have to figure out forms of self-defense that are short of violence. That's where we are. I noticed Patrick Yard tell the workers they must go slow, they must think at first glance. I would say, Patrick, you're right, but Patrick, you are the leader. You must lead the workers. There is time for a general strike in the public service. The last time the public servants had to go on strike was 1999, and the PPP at that time was forced to set up a tribunal. Clive Thomas, my party leader, Dr. Armstrong, and the PPP had a man, I think it was Gobinganga or one of them. They set up that arbitration tribunal, and that tribunal made recommendations to the PPP for the public servants, which the PPP did not honor. To this day, it does not honor them. But the point is, this is not time for a trade union leader in the face of the violence, the economic violence, to say to your people, to say to the members of your union, they must go slow. So you're telling them, you do what you want to do. No, you are the leader. And the public service union must go on strike. Withdraw your labor. Because if to them your labor means nothing, your labor means minus 7%, minus 10%, your labor means nothing. I'm in a Bob Marley mood to tonight. Didn't my people before me slave for this country? That's what Bob Marley asked. Didn't my people before me slave for this country? I build your cabin, and I plant the corn. Did my people before me slave for this country? You look in my face with corn and eat up all my corn. And I must sit down because of my fear of violence enveloping our society. You are counting on that. You are banking on the fact that we are not a violent people. You know, the likes of black people are violent. If black people engage in violence, society, it was violence against the most violent institution in human history, slavery. We're not really violent people. If we were, given what they did to us for 400 years, we would have been violent 24/7. We are not a violent people. And we must not pretend that we are a violent people. And we must not allow people to pin violence on us. But we are a resistance people. And we must resist. We must defend ourselves. The unions must call out their workers. The time has come for the unions to call their workers out on strike. Withdraw your labor. And let's take it from there. Some of you are too young to remember. But in Linden, in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, when the unions didn't want to call strikes, the workers would call strikes and force the union to endorse their strike. The Askrea group in Linden in the 60s and the early 70s called a series of strikes at the Bauxite Company. When the government of the day wanted to get the insurance money after nationalization to put it in something, the workers went on strike. It was called the Ryler strike. To the 1980s. 1983, a brother Leach dropped down on the job because in those days, you know, there was scarce food, scarce. People had to got to work in the morning. They couldn't afford breakfast. And the workers went on strike and forced the union to endorse strike. 1980. Your unions don't want to take action. Workers have to organize themselves. And you have to look to new and alternative leaders to lead you. We cannot sit down anymore. Workers, this is the end of the rope. You can't get worse than this. These people have no shame. They give you 7% and tax it. You have no shame. They give you as a little frack. Then you no pay raise since 2019. Did my people before me slave for this country and continue to do so? Is our people who have to educate our children. And our teachers, when they walk into those classrooms, then get Indian and black and Amerindian. They walk into that classroom and they give of their more than their lives. Sometimes neglecting their own children. When the teacher got to stay up, stay in class, stay till 5, 6 o'clock. They don't pick to the home, and they're there educating our children, our nurses, our policemen and women. And you cannot compensate them, even if you're giving a freck. You don't give them a big raise. No, we have reached the end of the rope. It is time for action.
Never Joe, never Joe, never Joe. Oh, money, never money, never money.
We have to educate our children.
Money, I know what you can even money. You can keep your conniving money. When you've been a corrupt, you have been tell me money. Now because your money done, you come with conniving money. Then you had pocket full. In a biz tell me morning. Now because you money all you hustle for tell me morning.
Yes, morning, neighbor.
Morning, neighbor, morning. Morning, neighbor, morning. Morning, I don't want you conniving morning. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. That's all the money that me walk for. A 2 pound note and a guilder piece. A 2 pound note and a guilder piece. A 2 pound note and a guilder piece. This is all the money that me walk for.
I said, morning, neighbor.
Money, neighbor, money. Money, neighbor, money. Money, I don't want you conniving money.
Oh, Joseph.
Morning, neighbor, morning. Morning, neighbor, morning. We don't want you conniving morning. They are governing like thugs, and we have to treat them like thugs. What say you? It's Tuesday. It's 7 hours 24 on the 7th of December in the year 2021. It's Tuesday, so we are expecting to have Dr. Hinds in the house, and he's there waiting on me. Yes, he's there waiting on us. He's such a pleasant and, what should I say, patient guy. So we are going to have the doctor in the house, but you know, we must get little drums. Drum it up! Dr. Hinds, welcome to another program of BUXTONIAN Morning Time. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Like you forget my viewers, you and them, you're around.
Good morning to your viewers and listeners, wherever you are.
All right, but it's raining in Guyana. I don't know what's happening at your end, in your neck of the woods.
Yes, I'm following the rain in Guyana. As I usually say, my neck of the woods is where I work, but I live in Guyana, so I am quite aware that there is rain in Guyana.
Well, I'm happy for that awareness. because there are lots of things which have been happening for the last week or so since we last spoke, and so I'm sure you're aware of them. You're aware of the fact that your friends in government, the installed cabal, moved last week to arrest former Minister of Finance Winston Jordan, and not only arrest him for an issue that many would consider closed because he was following Cabinet's instruction in the selling of that wharf to BK. History will tell us that the arrangement to lease and sell that wharf eventually were made under the previous PPP administration and simply completed under the AP and UAFC. But not only did they arrest him for completing that transaction, but he was also denied medical care while in their custody. How did you react to that? And I am sure you would have had more time to think about it. What are your thoughts on the issue?
Well, what, more of the same? Where does it end? It is clear that the government is governing by intimidation. It is trying to silence all critics of the government, and it is using its control of state apparatus to achieve that end. It's a gross abuse of power. All governments try to get at their opponents, through the use of the state. No government likes to be criticized. This government is not new in that regard. But given the nature under which the government came to power, or the circumstances under which the government came to power, given the nature of political relations in the society at this point, the government action takes on a new dimension, and that is a dimension of confrontation. In our delicate environment, any government wants to be careful about how it goes after its opponents and how it uses the state in that regard. And this government apparently has decided that it is going to push this situation to a confrontation and let the chips fall wherever they may be. That is my reading of the move to arrest Mr. Jordan. They had already given notice that they were uncomfortable with his criticism of the government and that they were going to go after him. And they have lived up to their promise. And so I see that arrest as part of the continued thuggish rule of the government, and the outcome can only be that the government is courting confrontation.
Well, in the schoolyard, when you come upon the schoolyard bully, and the bully is out there and taunting the other student or students, somebody gets in the middle usually and adds to the taunt, fire, burn me, and if you're bad, knock me back, and stuff like that. Do you think the opposition should fall prey to this, or may fall prey to this most recent aggravation, if I call it that?
Well, it depends on which opposition you're talking about. If you're talking about the official opposition, they are never going to fall prey to it, and they shouldn't. If you're talking about opposition like us, then we also shouldn't. We should try as much as possible to prevent such confrontation. The challenge for all of us is how to not fall for the government's bait, but at the same time, push back against the government. How do you not fall for this confrontation, which the government expects to be violent? How do you push back against that goading of us
to engage in violence, while at the same time opposing the government aggressive behavior. So it's a very delicate balance the opposition has to navigate. And I suppose all the opposition groups are in the process of doing so, because it is not an easy situation to be beaten every day, to see your supporters being beaten every day. You don't want to get into a kind of senseless brawl, which can end up in a situation that gets out of control. You don't want to do that because you'll be playing into the government's hand. But at the same time, you have to oppose the government beating you every day. So it comes down to strategy and tactics. And I suppose the opposition have to work that out away from the glare of the public. But the greater danger is that people, ordinary people without direction from the opposition, without direction from those of us who are activists, will decide to retaliate on their own. And that is the greater danger. Because once people decide they've had enough and they decide to retaliate on their own without any direction from the opposition, then what we have is a wild card out there that can consume the entire society. We went through that with the troubles from 2002 to 2006, with the gunmen in Buxton and where that led us. Does the government want to go down that road again? My sense is that they're pushing it. And once people on their own decided to go that route, then the opposition doesn't have any control over it. And we're talking about anarchy in the society.
Well, you said the government expects a violent confrontation. Why would any government want to push its citizens to confronting it violently?
He has decided, the PPP has decided that the only way it can govern Guyana is to govern exclusively and to govern by domination. It has come to the conclusion that it cannot work with the opposition. And so therefore, to govern Guyana, it has to do so on its own exclusively. It tried that during the 23 years with some degree of success. But like I said, eventually we had citizens taking matters into their own hands. And eventually we had some defection from the PPP scam. And then you had some opposition from some of us. A combination of all of that led to the electoral defeat of the PPP. The PPP read that defeat not as a referendum on the way they govern. They read that defeat as an error on their part, that they weren't aggressive enough on holding on to power. So this time around, they're not prepared to make that quote-unquote mistake. And so they are going aggressively. I think they've concluded that they can get away with it because the international community helped them to get into power, and it's not likely to put the brakes on them. That's one. Two, they're taking advantage of the fact that the opposition is disunited. And third, they are banking on fear on the part of the supporters of the opposition. So a combination of those things says to them that, look, we can govern exclusively, we can push the confrontation because we are going to win that confrontation, and the end game is total control of the society. It's a political gamble they're taking, and governments do gamble, parties gamble. The thing is that it's a big gamble, given, like I said, the nature of our society. It's not just going to be a political confrontation between supporters of two parties. It has ethnic overtones and undertones. And that is the danger. That is why I'm saying that we in the opposition have to try to thwart that at all cost. But if the government continues to hammer and push, at a certain point, we in the opposition would not be able to control the situation. As I said in my column or somewhere this weekend, I invoked Dr. King, the Prince of Nonviolence, who once said to the government in America that, look, if you continue to hammer African Americans, I am not going to be your water hose. When you set your fires, your political fires, your racial fires, don't expect me to go into the Black communities and to calm them down. If that's what you're gambling on, I am not a fire hose. And from a political standpoint, from a personal political standpoint, I am constantly saying we should avoid ethnic violence. I'm afraid of ethnic violence and what it will do to Guyana. We got away in the 1960s to some extent. But I think ethnic violence in 2021 is going to decimate our country. And I don't want that. But at the same time, the government cannot expect people like myself to preach nonviolence while they're acting violently. At some point, we will have to step aside. We cannot be the fire hose for the government. You can't be arresting Jordan on a Friday, putting out a wanted bulletin to arrest Bork on a Saturday, and next week somebody else, and next week somebody else. And you're taking advantage of the fact that we do not want an escalation of this thing. We do not want that, and you're taking advantage of it. At some point, we're going to stop and step aside. And you will have to take responsibility, Mr. Government, for the outcome.
But while you're saying, Dr. Hinds, that it is not your desire to see a racial conflict, to see violence erupted in the society and so on, the PPP is pushing another narrative in that it is identifying you as one of the fire pushers in this whole incident, in this whole situation. You as one of the instigators of confrontation with the government. I read yesterday an article coming from some group called the ICDN that is identifying overseas-based operatives and local talk show hosts and so on as the people who are antagonizing the situation. The article, I think, was saying that the PPP government is representative because according to population figures, the PPP is, 50-something%. Indians are 50-something%. Black Afro-Guyanese are 40-something%. And it was giving the breakdown, or at least what they thought was the breakdown of the Guyanese society. And arguing that if you look at the construct of the government, the PPP administration, it is representative in terms of its ministerial posts and so on. And so folks like yourself and Sherrod Duncan and other overseas-based Guyanese are pushing antagonism against the government despite the fact that it is representative. How do you?
Well, you know, all governments like to find people to blame for a situation that they are escalating, and this government is no different. What I find interesting is who they are labeling as the cause for this thing. Quote unquote, one, those of us who spend some time overseas. That's one demographic. Secondly, so-called social media talk show hosts. It says to me that there must be something that we are doing right, that the official opposition at home is not doing, and that the government doesn't want them to do. So it is isolating us as enemies, as violent people. We want to say to the opposition, the official opposition, don't get near to those people. Don't get near to those people. Because if you get near to those people, you are going to be doing just as they're doing, and violence and all that thing that they say we are doing. So the government has its game well thought out. Well thought out. And it's a matter of struggle, as I see it. I am not bothered by them saying that I am pushing the thing. They have to decide. They have to decide whether some of us who live overseas have the power that they say we have. How can people who live overseas and not in the country be the major opposition in the country? They have to answer that. They have to answer that. Secondly, they have to answer in regard to people like myself. On the one hand, they're saying we are causing trouble, but on the other hand, they say black people not listening to us. They have to decide. They have to decide. You see, they're creating these dilemmas, and they have to work out their dilemmas. As far as I'm concerned, we are doing our work, and we live in a world in which people move. We have always moved. Bob Marley talked about the exodus of Jah people. We have always been moving. People move in search of work. People move where their families are. But what the technology in contemporary world does is that we may be physically outside of the jurisdiction of a country, but we are politically inside the country. And that's what they cannot deal with. That's what they cannot deal with. So they're putting up these artificial barriers about overseas Guyanese and Guyanese at home. That boat has sailed. We no longer have overseas Guyanese and inside Guyanese. Technology and the ability of people to move up and down makes us one country regardless of our physical location. And that is what they cannot deal with. You know, in the old days, you know, when I entered politics, when you leave Guyana for 3-4 months, you don't have any contact with the active politics in the country because we didn't have the technology for that. Now persons like myself can leave Guyana, come out, work for 3 months, go back in Guyana, be there for 2 months, come out, work again for 3 months, go back there and be there physically for 4 months. But all the time, whether we are in and out, we are in the politics of the country. That is what they cannot deal with. That is what they cannot deal with. All right? And they're trying to make this division between Guyanese at home and Guyanese abroad and so on, and try to paint us as aliens. I'm old enough to remember a calypso that was very popular starting in 1976 by the Antiguan Calypsonian, short. Nobody gonna run me from where me come from. Me pick the musnyam, me pupa nosnyam. Nobody gonna run me from where me come from. And they're not going to run me from Guyana. Wherever I am, inside of Guyana, outside of Guyana, I will continue to do the work that I've been doing since I was 15 years old. And that is political activism. So whether they like it or not, that's their business. That's their business. We are contributing, whether we are inside of Guyana or not, but more than that, when you cut us off from the quote-unquote mainstream media, we have created new media to communicate and to mobilize our people. And so that's the truth. And whether they call me a troublemaker or not, it doesn't bother me. I've been called a troublemaker since I was a schoolboy. And if standing up against injustice makes me a troublemaker, I'm glad to be a troublemaker. John Lewis called it good trouble, you know. And they will have to deal with me. And they will have to deal with me because I'm not going anywhere.
Thank you for that. The PPP will continue to push the button. They will continue to antagonize the situation. They'll continue to take advantage of a weak opposition. Those are all things I heard you say in this morning's presentation. With that recognition, how do you or how should citizens feel, react to the news that there may be possible postponement, cancellation of the PNC's Congress, given the fact that for the last 16 months or so, people have been saying things will get hot, things will heat up after Congress and Aubrey Norton wins. That's the popular view of the public. Now that we're talking about a possible postponement, how do you think that will impact on the current situation?
Well, the PNC has to decide that. That's not a matter for those of us outside of the party. If the PNC comes to the conclusion that logistically it is not going to be possible to hold the Congress on Saturday, then they will have to make that decision, because you see, there is a lot that is riding on this Congress. And the thing that is uppermost in people's minds is the race for the leadership of the party, in particular the leader. And if the candidates are not satisfied that the logistics are in place to deliver a credible election, then they will they'll probably opt to postpone the Congress until the logistics can be put in place. And that's a real possibility. Now, speaking as a political analyst, if that were to happen, a couple of things could ensue. And one is that the momentum that has been building up over the last couple of months towards the Congress, that momentum could wane somewhat. We are going into Christmas, so about 3 weeks will be cut off from that. come back out of Christmas, they're talking about the first quarter of 2022. That first quarter could take us as far as March. So the momentum drops at Christmas, and then you have to lift that momentum again after Christmas. Human beings have other things to do. You know, we are political beings, but we're also economic beings. We have to take care of our daily lives. We have to work, we have kids, and sometimes the politics can hold our attention up to a certain point. So we could have the kind of momentum in the larger society wane somewhat, and they will have to pick up and build up again after Christmas. And that could be a negative. Another negative is, of course, the PPP. If the narrative is correct, that the end of the PPP, the PNC's Congress, the election of a new leader, will bring a new sense of purpose on the part of the PNC, a more engaged opposition from the PNC. If that narrative is true, postponing the Congress for 2-3 months, in a sense, is postponing that expectation. And a lot of what the PPP is doing is riding on the fact that the external forces are not going to push back against them, certainly not now. And the fact that the PNC has not worked out its leadership issue. So another 2-3 months, if that narrative is correct, would mean another 2-3 months of torture from the PPP.
Another 2-3 months of torture from the PPP.
Well, another 3 months of torture, but not just the torture, but without any really sustained opposition from the official opposition party.
Good. And now that we're talking about opposition from the sustained, from the official opposition party, and we certainly have identified social media activists like yourself and Rickford Burke and so on. Well, you both operate on all levels. While you're here, we are on the ground. While you're overseas, you are making your presence felt via these platforms. Rickford Burke was recently charged, as a matter of fact, a wanted bulletin was issued for Rickford Burke for the charge of sedition and seditious libel, etc. First and foremost, are you concerned that the same charges, same accusations eventually will visit you? And secondly, how do you interpret those charges?
Well, I don't want to put attention to me in a personal way. But of course, if they succeed with Burke, then they're going to come after the rest of us. And that's dangerous in the sense that what you're doing is that you're shutting down free speech. That for me is the larger issue. You're shutting down free speech because you're reading the cyber crime law in very narrow ways. How do you, what is dividing the people, exciting the people, you know, that language, exciting divisions among the people, was used in an early law passed in the United States in the 1790s. As those who know the United States well, the United States as a nation came into being in 1787. And by the 1790s, they're passing what they call the Sedition Act, which says, which goes went something like this, that there shall be no no opposition to the government that there should be no opposition that excites people to rise up against the government, something like that. And it was updated in the early 1900s during the First World War. It's there in the books, but it's not being used. And it's interesting that Guyana is using that same language, right? What is sedition? What is sedition? And in any case, my understanding is that that part of the law was taken out from the finished product. But the concern is what constitutes exciting racial divisions? You know, it's nonsensical. Guyana is a racially divided society. Nobody has to excite anything. Right? Guyana is one of the most divided societies in the world. Professor Henry Jeffrey reckons there are only about 5 or 6 countries like Guyana in the world. We are a deeply divided, bifurcated society. Nobody has to excite that. History has already excited that. Now, what in effect are you saying? Are you saying we cannot discuss race at all? And that is the objective of the government, is to shut down any discussion about race. And if you shut down discussion about race, then the government gets to carry out its racial agenda without criticism. And that, I think, is the objective of invoking this cyber crime law, especially the part that has to do with exciting racial hostility, right? What is exciting racial hostility? If you give one ethnic group $250,000 and you give another ethnic group $4,900, isn't that exciting racial hostility? When you give the private sector that is dominated by 1 or 2 ethnic groups a big tax concessions and so on, and all these other benefits that they get, which in effect means that the tax base is being decreased, which then translates to little money to pay public servants. Isn't that exciting racial hostility? The government itself is exciting racial hostility. What the rest of us are doing is that we are pushing back against that racial hostility. So I don't understand, but I do understand why they're going down that road, because they want to shut down any discussion about race. So David Hinds says, look, the private sector gets all this money, the public servants gets no money, the public servants get no money, and so public servants should spend their money wisely. That will now be racial hostility. If David Hinds says, look, we live in compartmentalized communities. For the most part, East Indians live in their villages, Amerindians live in their villages, Africans live in their villages. And so therefore, the political economy itself is compartmentalized. So if David Hinds says, look, you've got to sustain your own village or community economy, and one of the first things anybody does in any economy is that you buy local. You buy local. You know, whether that local means country or it means region, everybody knows buy local is a standard basic element of economics. Local in Guyana means our local communities. Our communities are compartmentalized. So if David Hinds say buy local, is that dividing the people? People already are buying local. East Indians don't leave their communities to go into a black community to buy what they produce. They don't. Africans do it because given our situation, we're always looking for the cheaper price. So if things are expensive in our community, we tend to go outside the community if it's selling for $10 less. It's a bad habit, but we do it. If David Hinds said, no, you got to stop doing that. And you've got to accept that your community, given the volume of what it produces, may have to sell something $10 more. Buy in your community. Sustain your community economy. Is that racism? Or is it a form of economics that accepts the reality of Guyana being a compartmentalized country? You see? And so therefore, it's nonsense in an ethnically divided society, in a racially divided society, to tell people who accept the reality of that and deal with the consequence of that, that they are dividing the people.
Dividing the people. I like to hang on these closing words in some of your responses, dividing the people. I'm going to take you to a place I'm not sure you will be comfortable going, but I have to take you there nevertheless. Recently, we heard a whole lot coming out of this little boy, Charles Ramson. Black people in a role model, etc., etc. He is apparently tasked with going into black communities and converting young black folks to maybe supporters of the PNC, of the PPP, I don't know, but it seems as though he has been using sports as his vehicle. But recently, I found out that at the boxing ball field, the zinc fence from the front of the field was removed and replaced. That zinc fence would have been at least 6 to 8 feet high, big zinc gate and everything. But his actions resulted in the zinc fence being removed and replaced with a 5 feet high chain link fencing. Lots of our young villagers, males especially, are singing the praises of the Charles Ramson action, if I can say that, as doing well for them. What are your views on this, what I call destruction of property, and the long-term impact on the community?
I really don't want to deal with that because I think that is the consequence. I want to deal with the problem. Because the problem is that, first of all, the statement by Ramson about role models, and he got us off talking about role models. The brother was not talking about any role models. The term role model there was used as a mask. What he was talking about is a long-held stereotype about black communities. He said, I get up in the morning and I see my father get up and dress and go to work. And there's a long stereotype in the black community that black men are absent from their families, or they're present, but they don't like to work. They're lazy. That is what he was getting at. He used the word role model, and we start to talk about role models. He gets us off talking about that. Oh, Charles Ramson, and everybody knows black people have produced people who have done well in life. You know, everybody knows that. He's not talking about that. He's not talking about how many lawyers we produce, how many doctors, how many politicians. He's not talking about Burnham as role model and this body as role model. He got us off on that wavelength, but that's not. The African male always broke. The African male can't run a business because he always spending all the money that he make from the driving the minibus. At the end of the day, he can't go and drink and give the 5-child mother this. Those are the stereotypes of the African male. And that is what Ransom was getting at. He wasn't getting at no role model. He was getting at the African male. And he's saying that we in the PPP want to produce a certain kind of African male. We want to produce what the Jamaicans call some dons. We want to produce some dons. And these dons, they're going to have a lot of money. They're going to come and they're going to share all the money in the village. But they will also protect us. That's what dons do. Right? And so what the minister is saying, the policy of the government is to create some dons in the Black community. A new type of African male. And we want those African males to be the ones that young Black people model themselves after. That is what the brother is into. And that is vicious. And that has to be fought against. We have to protect our young males and females from getting into the business of believing that Donism is our economic salvation. That is what they are getting at. We are going to produce in every village, we are going to create about 10, 20 dons. They're going to be flush with money because we're going to give them contracts. We're going to give them money otherwise. And they are going to be able to then share that money out in the village. And then when we come in the village, they will protect us for creating them as dons. That's the plan. And until our Black people, our commentators understand that that boy wasn't trifling about, I see on the internet, Burnham was a role model, this body is a role model, and so on. He's not interested in that. He knows that. He knows we have produced. Those people teach him. Those people teach him. Those people nurse him. Those people protect him when he's sleeping. Those people protect the country. He knows that. And he wants us to go off and be boasting about how much people done well in life. While the real thing that he's interested in is creating a new type of African male in our communities to create dons.
I see Mark Benshop saying that Ramsden apparently is the new short man and the Phantom is back. This Donism that you have described is Are we saying it's a modification of the previous phantom?
No, I use the word done, but it's the same phantom.
Okay. At 8 hours 13, let us talk about something which should have been happening, I think, happening last month, and that is local government elections. Yesterday, a lot of us became aware by a letter circulating that local government elections have been postponed, or there is a move to postpone local government elections, which were due sometime this year. I have been anticipating it. I am sure a lot of persons have been anticipating it. Ever so often I've been saying I am not hearing anything from the opposition on the possibility that this will happen, because there was an evident absence of preparations for local government elections. The PPP has done it again. The postponement of local government elections.
Let's put that in perspective, Kedak. Vincent Alexander told us that we couldn't have local government elections. Insofar as the PPP has done it again, the PPP said it's not going to go to another election under the current or under the staff that was there at GCOM at the last election. And so they did a couple of things to slow down the process. They started to charge people who work in a GCOM, and then they dismissed the top GCOM staff, which means that you don't have a secretariat to do the work. You now have to advertise. So what the PPP has done is the PPP has slowed down the process to achieve its end. And that is that it is not going back to an election with the same election staff. That's what the PPP has done, nothing else. Right? They use the power and they use the friendly vote of the chair at GCOM to slow the process down so that they can achieve their objective of a new GCOM secretary. I and some of us argued that it's okay for the PPP to draw its line. It's a line in the sand. The opposition should have drawn its line in the sand. And that is, we are not going to go to another election with the same voters list and the same this and the same that. We have been saying that, but we have not been using our institutional power to achieve that end in the same way that the PPP has used its institutional power to achieve that end. Look, you have to decide, do you want to go to an election with an apparatus that is going to lead to an outcome unfavorable to you? The PPP has said no. And we should not be pushing for elections with a flawed voters list. We should not be pushing for elections until the anomalies that we saw in the recount, that the apparatus that made those anomalies possible, until those are corrected. So it's not too late to do that. The PPP get the first jump, and they think it's not too late for the opposition to now draw its line in the sun. A new voters list and all those anomalies that we saw in the recount, they have to be corrected. Remember, the PPP is not only operating at the level of GCOM in terms of disrupting what happens at GCOM and throwing down the line. They have draft legislation on the table. And I would like to see the opposition draft legislation be put on the table too. So I am not crying that elections have been postponed, right? Because if we are saying that the whole system is flawed, then let's correct it. During the impasse last year, I had proposed that we vitiate the elections and we put in place an interim government, central government, for about 2 to 3 years to do the very things that we're doing here. You know, reform GCOM, reform the electoral laws. Of course, we didn't fight enough for that. My own view was that we should have brought our people on the streets and demanded that. Our leaders didn't do that. What it means is that the PPP is now overseeing something that a joint government should have been overseeing. So I don't think we ought to cry that, local government elections are postponed. It's whether the next local government election will be held under rules that are favorable to one party or rules that are favorable to all parties.
Finally, before I open up the lines, or before you tell us about anything you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask you about, the Ghanaian Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister was here recently. One would have expected a whole lot of opposition action to highlight some of the abuses of this current administration. We have seen none.
Well, Kadaki, you can't expect us to squeeze oil from sand. The opposition is in disarray. That's one of the consequences of losing, or one of the consequences of being pushed out at the last election. It's as simple as that. We don't have a unified opposition. We don't have an opposition that's singing from the same hymn book. And so therefore, in the absence of that, what you expect? What it says to us is that we have work to do on the opposition side. That's what it says to us.
We have work to do on the opposition side. I also of the firm believe that we have work to do in the communities. Community leaders and residents of communities ought to start doing some work in preparation for the people's movement, if I call it that, in preparation for the challenges which we are faced. Dr. Hinds is soon going to be with us, and we are going to be coming to your communities. I want to ask you, like I usually do, if you have a desire to see us work with your community, if you're willing to have us work with your community, if you're willing to be an organizer for your community, please contact me on 622-5933 by WhatsApp or regular phone call. And I prefer you do that. Don't worry the live chat. I generally don't get to see all the comments on the live chat. So make contact with me on 622-5933. Give me that indication and let us start organizing your community, because like I said, the doctor is going to be here and we're going to be coming to talk with you and perhaps offer a little guidance here, a little guidance there.
What we should say, Kidaki, is that we have to organize at various levels. And we have to organize at the political level, at the level of political parties. And if people want to work with us at that level, we belong to the WPA. But people may not be interested in politics. They may be interested in organizing culturally, a community short of politics. And in that regard, we have our organization, the Society for African Guyanese Empowerment, SAGE. So people should feel free to decide what kind of work they want us to collaborate on. They want us to collaborate on cultural work, doing work among Black people, to help to lift them culturally and perhaps economically and whatever else, we can work with you through SAGE. If people are interested in the hard politics, we work with you through the WPS. So I just wanted to say that there are options there.
Thank you. Anything you want to say before we open up the lines?
No, I think I've said enough.
Okay, it's now 8 hours 23. You're tuned to the BUXTONIAN Morning Time. Your host, Kidaki Amsterdam. I'm chatting with Dr. David Hinds on the varying issues prevalent in the society currently. The lines are open. 6225933 is the number to call. Stacey Mattes, make contact with me. 6225933 on WhatsApp. Maybe after the program, let's start to talk this thing through. Yes, you can now call because the lines are open. 6225933 is the number to call. Call and let's talk the thing. We have our first caller for the morning. Caller, you live. Good morning.
Yes, good morning to all the viewers. Good morning, Mr. Tadaki and all viewers around the world. One thing I have to say, right? These, Mr. What you name there again? I can't, Mr.
Dr. Hinds.
What is right there? Dr. Hinds. What Dr. Hinds talk is very true. And I like certain things that he say. All right? These, when you talk about the thugs, that like in Jamaica, they got thugs, right? These thugs just protect people. You pay them, all right? And why you trying to do is the same thing what Mr. Hinds say. Get thugs to protect them. Give them money, give them all kind of stuff, right? And they got certain time people who got stall and them thing and so on. You pay a ransom. You pay a ransom to these people. It thugs them that you have. Collect money from them. That nobody can rob them or do them nothing. All right? So the thugs know everything about them, the people stealing and doing all kind of thing. All right? And could go back and get them killed. You see? So these are the things what they're trying to bring in Guyana, but it wouldn't be a nice scene because sometimes the thugs turn back on you. You understand what I'm saying? They turn back on you, and when you believe they're protecting you, they kill you. All right? Because some deals go wrong. These things come to Guyana, it will mash Guyana up periodly. You understand what I'm saying? So what you saying about Guyana got Guyana this, and people in Guyana just lie low. But as Carter said, when people rise up, no government can stop them. You understand what I'm saying? And it will not end up nice in Guyana. And I see where you're going to. You would have a revolution, and I'm saying it again, because they're oppressing the black people and the government, oppressing people, not only black, even their own race. You understand what I'm saying? And this thing will create a big problem if you go back to 2006 and 2001, when you find when you had the gang them raise up, like Shadman gang and what kind of gang where they have been stored up. You understand me? Is that what you come into? And now we have media. It's not like we learn you have to go and buy radio station from Jargon. You don't buy radio station now. Social media. From the time you go up on your phone, your group gonna rise. You understand what I'm saying? It's so it going. With Gaddafi, when Gaddafi used to treat the people in bad and take. Social media just come out. You saw the gang up on Gaddafi. All right. Gaddafi now that's so much money in treating the people and lowering the people, thinking everything. You see when they put the social media out, you see now Gaddafi they're going to truck and throwing out money and giving people. Throwing money, giving people. People didn't want money at that time. People want him out and dead. Ways now. You understand me? So what they're doing, them digging hole for themselves. Alright? And the young youths coming up, learning, watching, and hearing, and they getting learning, and all this type of thing were going on. They're watching and they're just lie low. It's not violence I talking, you know. It's not violence. I want people to get me wrong. I ain't talking no violence. I just say what will happen and what will happen if this government continue like that. And the next 2 years, 3 years, Ghana will be our parole. Nobody will live for enjoy the aisle money, what they say coming from there. You understand, Mr. Kadaki? So that's my talk for this morning. It's not violence I talking. And I want the person what is calling and say we talking violence. I don't know the name. I don't want to feel we talking violence. It's reality we talking. All right? That's all my take for now.
Thank you, caller. Let's take time out to say good morning to the monitors, the media monitors located at certain parts of the government ministries. Hey, my friends over at DPI, y'all, good morning. How y'all doing? NCN, respect. Chronicle, good morning. How y'all doing? I got friends in the media, you know. Call your live, good morning.
Yeah, good morning to you and Dr. Hinds. Dr. Hinds, I want to take my apology for not being on your program. Right now, I'm doing some things that I have to be going out in the evenings to look after. Don't get me wrong, not to climb by the ship or go by cathedral, but some other business.
Rhonda.
I ain't laughing. No, now, we'll be moving along. Now, I listen to what Dr. Hinds was saying. Now with this fiasco that Barrett is trying to attack Rickford Burke, people don't get foolish. Rickford is in America. If Rickford come to Guyana, he's going to die. God will kill him. But once Rickford is in America and doing the right things that he is supposed to do, they cannot touch him. When it comes to being extradited, what crimes has Rickford committed against Guyana? All Rickford do is talking the truth. I could remember when an Indian woman, a Kuli woman, called out for people to kill President Granger, who was a president, and she was trying to locate people to murder President Granger. During here, nobody extradited she for what she was doing. Rickford Burke has never stood up on any platform and called for the murdering of the installed fraudulent head of the cabal. He has never done that. Now I think I heard that they want Rickford head on a platter. The PPP is treading on dangerous grounds. And if the PPP should continue down this path that they are trying to go to, I fear what will happen in Guyana. Because Guyana is a place now that is a weaponized place. And you don't know what people are going to do. Guyanese now on the internet, more than anything else. And they will seek ways and means. Don't wake a sleeping giant. Probably because they see that the masses of black people, Africans, just going along. We going along, yes, but you know what is in our mind. I do attend Lenore Market, and I listen to the pulse. When you go in the market, you got mostly Indian people selling, and on the lips of every seller at the market, it's the Veda dollar. Last Friday, I went into a store up at Freedom, and to my horror, a pound of sugar that was being sold for $60 is now $120 for 1 pound of sugar. Last week, the pound of sugar was $90 a pound, and if you buy the loose pound 100, it's 120. Flour price raised because I would buy whole wheat. Whole wheat you used to pay $2.70, $2.50 for a pack. I think a packet of 1 kg packet of whole wheat flour is $300 and something, and the prices just keep going up. So right now this country is in a state, and when it comes to people like the Christopher Rams and all of the business, the private business holders, they are now talking down the PPP. They assisted the PPP. They stood in the thing and make certain that the PPP got power, because the PPP had incited during the run-up to elections. They would have been better if they had gained the ruling of the country. And I'm glad that the same business public who officially saw to it that they go into power, they are now reaping sour grapes and the teeth edge. And you see with this corona thing where you see they licking out, putting out, this will help crippling the place. I remember Ravina back in the days. Ravina started with one store on Regent Street and all over Guyana. Georgetown had about 10 Ravina stores, East Coast, it's all around the place, Linden. And when the same PPP instituted the 16% VAT, that brought Ravina to the knees till day like today. Ravina can't get her back because of the 16% VAT. And in this time here now, it's the use of the cards. And the people now have realized because of the institution of the cards, they are losing business and they are trying to regroup the business and they cannot because the Chinese take over. The last thing, now Bharat had a lot of things he did, and the things that he did, the man of one of these foreign men, many of them, the man wanted to sell like me take over the show. He talks where all the atrocities against the blacks. There's some part of America and this, they're my place. I can't remember the place right now. Anyway, so he is more wanted than Rickford. The only body who want Rickford is Bharat and Anil to kill Rickford because they feel that Rickford is a black eye opener. But they are needed outside. Why Anil didn't go back to the States to buy Christmas tree? Because right now they ain't looking after Hindu thing, you know. You gonna see who's dressed up with the garlands and that kind of thing. He would have been in America shopping, but he can't know because you know, anytime he jump on a plane and he head back up North America, they will be picking him up for attempting and threatening to kill an American citizen. So good luck to the PPP. The last thing, now this person who did the fence and so they claim is the persons from Hits and Jams. Now Hits and Jams get a big contract to build the school. That's why they cost so much up Linden. I wonder what type of building they would get. Bharat to build the bridge, I see following, he walking in Barnum footsteps. But everybody know Barnum was a womanizer. He had 2 wives, he met children. He following Barnum. Barnum got children, he left. Don't think he didn't get his son, but he left children. Anyhow, he built the Barbies Bridge with NIS money. Plus, wherever the NIS money built, and when the Barbies Bridge was built, before it was being commissioned, the bridge had to be repaired. You ever think you build a house, and before you go in the house, you gotta repair the house? He had to repair the bridge, where he built in the swamp with NIS money. Now, people in NIS cannot get increases when things go up. You gotta stay at a mega money because NIS does not have funding. So, I don't know what happened to Bharat, but anyway, we back in onto the PNC Congress. I don't know why they don't get that off the thing and move forward with what is going on. Because if PNC keep at this Congress thing, they will not see what is going on before them. They ain't got time with the petition. I had talking about in-house fighting. PNC should stop the in-house fighting and come out and face the Trojan horse of the PPP, the installed regime at this place in time. That is my comment. Kadaka, remember, tomorrow is the big day, the birthday. Bye-bye, bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Rhonda. We're going to get Rhonda something special for tomorrow, bye. I know she's collecting it. But don't worry yourself. We got your back, Rhonda. You're tuned to the Buxtonian Morning Time. It is now 8 hours 37. Let's play a voice note as we await your other calls. Voice note.
The problem with the youths in society right now in Guyana is that the majority of the ones that support the PPP government, they're too young to know what happened. They're too young to know the history of the PPP. They're too young and they're not interested in the history. They're interested in, oh, you know what? There are people that give me a nice time. Let me go and we can swing and have a wonderful time. No, you got to know your history. You got to know the history. When you know the history, you're going to look and you're going to think different about these people. These people are not the ones to play with. I'm going back. Know your history. And as the caller said just now, there's social media. Go back to the social media and you look back at certain things. Look at certain article in 2006 and come forward to a certain period at that time. And you're going to see all the blood that was shed in the street. And the blood that was shed in the street was of which kind of people? Which kind of people? The youths are not educated on the history in their own country, because at that time they were still drinking milk out of bottles, so they're too young to know what's going on. So now they jump up and they say, oh, you know what, the government doing this and they're doing that for me. No, they ain't doing crap for you. What the government is doing is what they're supposed to do, because taxpayers are paying tax, and that's what the government is supposed to do. The government, you don't work for the government work for you. And especially a young man from Buxton saying, oh, Mr. Minister, you're doing this. He's such an asshole. Sorry for my language. He is such an idiot. I would not even follow him even if I was blind. He's such an idiot. The government work for the people. The people does not work for the government. And the youths are so young. I'm not going to say they're ignorant, but they're ignorant of their history. If you don't know your history, your future going to be dimmed. And that's what the government of the day is doing. That's what they're doing.
Thank you for that voice note. The lines remain open. 6225933 is the number to call. Call, let's talk the thing. You're in the house with the professor this morning. Lines remain open. Call in live. Good morning.
Morning, Kadaki, morning, Dr. Hinds. Great program again. I will agree with Dr. Hinds in reference to we should not be calling or should be enthusiastic about local elections, and we should have been perhaps drawn a line in the sand that we will not participate in local and regional election unless there's a new voters list. It just seems like the wishy-washy leadership are always behind. And I really can't understand that, is that we are not putting forward any proposal, but we are reacting to what the PPP doing with nothing of our own. Like saying, there is no way, telling our supporters, no election without a new voter list. That should be plastered all over social media, placards, anywhere, and let GCOM know that that's what we mean. Just don't be reacting to what the PPP does. And I really just can't figure out why we as a people, here is it, they're killing us or imprisoning us, and we are calling for them to be nice to us. What set of people we are? When people are lashing you, and you're going to ask the same people who are lashing you to be nice. You can't do that. We are always a people singing about peace and always loving, while the people get away with murder. Something in our psyche, in my opinion, have left us docile, and I believe it's this Christianity thing that have put, the fear of God in our lives, that if we do certain things, we're not going to heaven. So until we are retrained in a lot of psychological warfare and how we should act towards, how people act towards us, we're going to be in this stupor for, beyond generation. And I do agree with the voice note is that we have got to educate our youngsters. I agree with the Kadaki. We need to form groups where we go into African community and teach about our history. Without that, we are screwed for generations to come, and that's my take.
Thank you, caller. Voice note.
Good morning, Kadaki. Good morning, Dr. Hinds. Dr. Hinds, I'm so happy that you could have brought back this whole conversation to the rightful place of what Ranson said. I was keep telling people he never mentioned the word role
Call
model.
all the line.
I remember having some fight with some friends.
Yeah.
I said this was not about saying there's no role model in the black community. He was speaking, in my mind, about the black fathers and children seeing their own fathers in an economic stable condition. I know so many children grew up without a father in the family. I'm not saying it happened in the Eastern community, but this was the black community. And I think a lot of the men were shamed and embarrassed. And that's why the narrative spun out of control, that he was speaking about role model. Even Harman went and picked it in front of his office. He never said anything about we don't have role model. He never said that. I know there's so many black families without a father, and those fathers need to step up. I know a lot of children grow up poor and punishing when the father running around with 3, 4 women. And these black men need to come home, need to look after family, need to be the role model of your family. And I think all those other stations have to stop. And we need to find some way to examine how we can get fathers to be fathers for the children and stop this thing that he said about they are not role models in the black community. Are you a black man? Are you a role model to your children? That is a question we need to ask. So many children are being born out of wedlock. We have one of the highest rates of children being born out of wedlock, not even in Guyana, but even in America. We need to stop this nonsense and be fathers to our children. Thank you, Dr. Hinds and Kadaki.
Thank you for that voice note. I think some votes have been missed, but we'll talk about them later. Calling live, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Kadeki. Good morning, Dr. Hinds. I want to send a shout out and a sort of honorary appreciation for Finance Minister as well as Rickford Bork. I think they're both contributing their lot to facilitating the removal of the PPP. Now to the coalition and to us as a people. And being that we have embraced the premise that the coalition is in office by illegitimate means, hence they are illegitimate. At the parliamentary level, Mr. Harman is saying that the PPP is illegitimate. Then why is Mr. Harman condoning and having a relationship with illegitimacy? Okay? It's almost paradoxical. If you are in a bad relationship, then file for divorce. But I can't see how is it that you're filing for divorce, and every time I turn around, you're in bed with the person who you say you want to divorce. You see, and it's one thing for the coalition to make an idiot of themselves, but it's another thing to ask us to continue and support idiosyncrasies and foolishness. Okay? So Mr. Harman and Granger and the rest of us need to understand that the coalition is saying that the PPP are illegitimate. Now, being that they're illegitimate, I agree that they are, then the onus is upon us in the movement to remove illegitimacy. Let's think now. Okay? Because illegitimacy can only render daily illegitimate actions. You cannot get legitimized actions from an illegitimate entity. Am I correct, Mr. Hinds? Can we expect to get illegitimate government actions from a body that is illegitimate? You can't get blood out of stone. And if we say that they are illegitimate, why are we expecting legitimacy from them? Another point. Dr. Hinds made the question and made the call together with Rickford Bourke, that we must remove the PPP. I agree with that 1,000%. But then to say we must remove the PPP, that's a statement. But that statement needs substance to go along with it. So I asked the question, if we put out the call to remove the PPP, and he didn't say immediately, but when we put out the call to remove the PPP as we have done, what follows? What does preparation for removal look like? What should removal look like? And how do we prepare to remove the PPP? Okay, because the onus is upon us now. Once we say we want to remove the PPP, then we must do the things which bring about that removal. Every week I notice the narrative is changing. 1 week is reparative justice, another week is breakdown, the other week is Ivleri, the next week is 7%. We got to make up our mind, what's our narrative? What is our narrative in the coalition, in the movement? Because it doesn't seem like we have a comprehensive, specified narrative, because every week someone is dictating what our narrative should be. Have we noticed that? So, are we asking a whole diaspora people to be wishy-washy? Every week we got a different narrative? What's that about? Are we seriously trying to remove the PPP, or are we just intellectually masturbating on the air? Right? Because now we are waiting. Now I see Mr. Aubrey Norton is busying himself talking about GCOM. What's that about? We have a victory in the declaration that's in abeyance, that was set aside by the court. But we have a bona fide victory in the petitions. And Aubrey Norton is busying himself trying to get us to shift our mentality away from a victory and to accept that we are going towards another elections. Another elections for what? Are we for real? How are we talking about another elections and we haven't yet proper affirmed our victory? You see, so it's one thing to say the PPP is illegitimate. Then the onus now is upon us to remove illegitimacy. I can't see right-minded, educated advocates for progress romanticizing illegitimacy. That's what the coalition is doing every day in Parliament. If you don't love a woman, divorce her and take steps to divorce her. But I cannot see we're taking steps when we are busy courting the PPP. And I want to say, if you're going to lead us as a public advocate, let's have the narrative that implicates removal. It mustn't be just removal to say removal. Removal requires substantive action to remove. We must see removal. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for calling. Voice note.
Good morning, Mr. Kadaki and Mr. Hinds. I saw a video circulating with Mr. Joe Harmon say that regardless of what, I can't remember the whole thing, regardless of what, he is the leader, the PNCR until new elections. Could you highlight that, because I know some people talking about it and, you want to know, the true fact of it or, whatever. Thank you.
Thank you for that voice note. Dr. Hinds, a lot has been said. Anything you want to respond to or endorse or highlight what?
Well, I go back to the very first caller who talked about the experience in Jamaica with garrison politics, where the Dons were in charge of the constituencies, and they literally run things on behalf of the political party. That model is there. There was a Don who was sent back home from Miami in St. Kitts, literally ran the country, share out book bags, share out this, share out that, share out this, share out that. The government had to arrange for him to be sent back to Miami because he had taken over the country. We now have gangs running Haiti. So these people are trying to turn the black communities into garrisons that are that will be governed by bad boys, which means that they're going to give them the resources. They're going to share things out to people. That is how the government sees development in black communities. Where you share out things to us and they set up these bad boys or dons or whatever we call them, and they become the medium. They are going to be the chairman of the village, in effect. That is the model PPP wants to impose on black communities. That is the deepness of what that Mr. Ramson said. He wasn't talking about Burnham, and I understand our people, want to point out that we had great people.
Hold on the line.
That's all. So I just want to emphasize what that first caller said. And the second caller talked about education. Sometimes people poo-poo education. They feel that all we have to do is to run on the streets and start behaving bad. And they don't understand the power. What education will do is to save our communities from the clutches of the Don. So we have to get into those communities, all of us, and to do the kind of work that is needed. PPP is moving ahead with its plan for the black communities. And that plan, like I said, is to install these bad boys as leaders of the communities. And they're going to be flush with resources, and our people are going to find it very hard to resist those resources. So, I don't want to be an alarmist, but I agree with the two callers.
Dr. Hinds is saying to Benny Bemekwa, she will take notice. And I'm so happy that you emphasize on the role of the Dons in the communities. Because just last week, a video was circulating with a particular individual saying that, look, I run things in Buxton. And as long as I'm in Buxton, law and order shall follow. I don't care what you all say. Who vex, keep it to yourself. Right? So thanks to that, I hope not. Those who have seen the video certainly will be able to draw the nexus. Caller, your live, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Amsterdam. Good morning to Dr. Hinds. And I want to address Dr. Hinds mainly. This is concerning, I don't know if you can remember during the election campaign, this international organization put out a report on Guyana's oil sector, and then they had to withdraw it because it wasn't true. I don't know if you can remember that.
I certainly remember that report.
I do.
Yes. Can we as a people sue these people for the damage that they caused us because of that thing we actually lost the election to? Can we take some actions against them, because people need to be responsible and they need to put their money where their mouth are. Secondly, I don't know if you guys been following the Trinidad, I think it's in Tobago, they have the elections going on right now. And the same nonsense the opposition is trying to do to Mr. Rowley and some other black people over there. I think I had sent the video to you, Mr. Amsterdam. I don't know if you looked at it.
I did.
But yeah, they have the same thing going on. And I'm thinking that for some reason, I'm tempted to say that this thing is in these people's DNA, but I'm thinking it's the love of money, because If being a prime minister or a minister had no financial benefits and perks with it, I am certain that a lot of them would not have been fighting out there, fighting to stay in there at all costs. I am thankful to Dr. Hinds this morning for reminding us that we need to advocate for new voters list and new registration. That's the only way, along with the other things, that the coalition would stand a chance to get back in there. And I had yes, this is for those persons who are singing the PPP praises. I term them, they should look at the movie Imitation of Life, because they're just imitators. When they messed up, the same people would kick them down the drain. So I'm saying that we need to keep up the fight, and you know, we will get there. And for me, this whole thing has caused a lot of Guyanese to come together, to unify, to connect with people that you never even know existed out there, and we should keep it up. And it's a movement. It's a movement, and we now get started. So God bless you, gentlemen, and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, caller. Voice notes. There are two of them coming up.
Good morning, Dr. Hinds and Kadaki. In my opinion, I feel there is a breakdown in every ethnicity when it comes to some things. But yet, Ramson directed his rhetoric specifically to the black family. Role model to him are business people. Some business people obtain wealth through questionable means. Ramson doesn't have the authority to speak to the black family about role model. He's part of a government that is suppressing the black family. I hope he knows that. Thanks.
I thought Mr. Hinds or you could actually would address the video that I spoke about. And he said it with a very serious face. I don't know if it's a doctored video or what, but he said it with a very serious face. He's the leader regardless of what. You know. I would like you to highlight it, please, if you could.
Well, the fact is, if Joe said he's the leader of the PNC, regardless of what, until the Congress and the elections are held, I don't see any issue with that. The fact is, he's the leader of the PNC. No, is he? No, he's not. He's the opposition leader, right? The chairman of the PNC is actually David Granger. The leader of the PNC is David Granger. So perhaps Dr. Hinds saw that video and will want to respond. Let's take this call. This is our final call, and then Dr. Hinds will respond to whatever, and we'll close the show because it's 9 o'clock right now. Calling live, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Kadaki.
Good morning,
Dr. Hinds. How are you, gentlemen?
Morning. Fine, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so one of the things, discussions have been going on within communities, but one of the resistance and the reluctancy of participants would be the political alignment that continues to be a bit of a hindrance. I wouldn't necessarily say hindrance, but for those who are not fully into politics, they may play the role, for example, at election time, but they just don't want to be engaged in the political back and forth, especially with the current environment that is that we're in politically. The inactiveness of the current opposition, the abuse of the current government, etc. So, you know, one of the things, the approach I think might need to be done, prepared, is to have it be done outside of the political realm. While political figures can play a role, I think the actual contact with people should be those persons within a neutral position for people to buy in at a faster rate, because time is of the essence at the moment in terms of bringing people up to date, and a meeting ground for persons ought not to be in the political realm only. For example, communities are not necessarily meeting as they should, because also the government is kind of putting down the local government election that could have played a critical role in that aspect. So, like I'm saying, I think we had the discussion prior where we had concluded that political figures ought to play their role, and we understand that. But I think the initial approach to villages should be where we have non-political persons represent the village in terms of initiating discussions, preparing people for the corrective actions that are needed in terms of getting rid of the government, who you're putting in government for our side, because even our side is not too prepared. Let's say, even if it's not election, our current leader, for me, like I said, we know where we stand with that. I wouldn't go through all the whole detail with that, but like I said, I'm sure that we could do better in that part politically. But I'm just saying, for the village approach, I think they should consider a different. I think we were discussing with places like Agda, etc. They could play a more outspoken role and visit communities and not just be stationed in the city without outreaches, etc. Well, thanks. That's one of the inputs that I wanted to make. I know we
Thank
have
you,
the time,
caller.
so I'll save the rest for later. Thanks.
Thank you. And so that was our final caller for the day. Dr. Hinds, your closing remarks.
Yeah, I want to endorse the last caller's approach. I mentioned early in the program that persons may not want to go organize politically, and in that regard, we are putting forth our organization, SAGE, and other Black organizations should be able to go into the communities and mobilize too. It should not be just the political party. So I completely endorse that approach. As regards the video that the brother is asking about, I have not seen the video, but I suppose he's referencing the discussion that's going on as to whether Mr. Harmon would remain as the opposition leader if, let's say, Norton or Van West Charles or one of the others were to win. And I think initially, Harmon had said the leader of the party should also be the opposition leader. I have not seen the video, but I've heard that he's probably changed his mind. No, I'm not sure. But I heard somebody said that there's a video going around in which Mr. Harmon is perhaps suggesting that if he were to lose the leadership, that he has to remain as the opposition leader in Parliament, because as the opposition leader, he's opposition leader of the AFC, APNU, and not as the PNC. So I think that may be what the caller is referencing. I don't know. But that will present quite a problem for them in the PNC that they will have to work out. A couple of the callers have talked about us removing the government, and we want to say that we're not trying to overthrow the government by force. We're talking about the removal of the government by forcing them to go to new elections, and for us to organize to win those elections when they come, or if the petitions are heard, for us to win the petition. So I don't want anybody to get any wrong impression that we're talking here about going and overthrowing the government by force and all of that kind of stuff. We want to build, we should be building a movement that puts enough pressure on the government to force it to call fresh elections. And let's fight at that level. So I just wanted to reiterate that. There's another caller who said something that I wanted to endorse. The caller was talking about the Tobago story, and she was wondering aloud whether it's in the DNA of Indian Caribbean people to behave in a certain way. Of course, I do not support, and I know she does not support that it's their biological DNA, but it's in their political DNA. I think Indian Guyanese and Indian Trinidadians have worked out that they live in divided societies, and they've concluded that this thing about a national unity where we all live together happily is really a delusion. It's an illusion, sorry. And that they have decided that power is what matters. And they may not like their party, they may not like everything about their party, but that they will close ranks and get power. I think there's a way in which Indian Guyanese and Indian Trinidadians have come to understand the power that is different from the way we Black people understand power. I think we Black people tend to think about the national at the expense of the ethnic and cultural. We are the ones who would easily say, I'm Guyanese, I'm not African Guyanese. You'll never hear an Indian Guyanese saying, I am Guyanese, I'm not an Indian Guyanese. You know, they don't. They have because of their cultural institutions, whether they're religious or other institutions, they have a deep sense of their ethnic identity. And they've merged that with politics. And they've decided that at this historical juncture, that we are not about to unite. And so therefore, this is a fight for yourself. While we in the Black community are preaching colorblindness, in the Indian community, they're preaching color consciousness. And we have to get with the program, you know. That is why the PPP is angry with somebody like myself. Because I'm saying that we have to be color conscious, we have to be race conscious, we have to be ethnic conscious. They would like us to continue saying we are Guyanese and not African Guyanese. They would love us to do that. What it means is that we would not see power in ethnic and cultural terms. East Indians are. I don't blame them. They've looked around in Trinidad and in Guyana, and they've looked at the 70 years of independence, and I think they've made a determination. In Trinidad, they flirted in 1986 with the NAR, the National Alliance for Reconstruction. That lasted for one term because Pandey and Robinson couldn't agree. Then they flirted again with the People's Partnership, which was dominated by the Indian UNC, and that worked better, but eventually they lost power as a result of that. And so they have worked out in their heads that, look, we have to consolidate power because it is through political power that we will get the economic power that they want and that we as Africans shall want. We are more, as I said, we Black people, we are more invested in the national. And I don't see anything wrong with that. My objective is for a national government that includes all the political forces, you know? But I am arguing that we have to get to the national via the cultural. And we have to, this colorblindness stuff is not working for us. It's not working for us. Our societies are not colorblind societies. They're not. We live in a color consciousness society in Trinidad and in Guyana. There are moments when we get together. In Trinidad, at Carnival time, they get together. But when Carnival is over, they're going back to their color consciousness. David Rudder said, how we vote is not how we party. So once the party is over, you know, they think back, you know. The explainer in Trinidad, he said, you know, if Black people don't get their act together, they're going to kick me out of the dance. So the very party that we like, they will take it over and kick me out. I mean, I don't go to clubs now. I'm too old for that. But when I used to, I would see the people who take over the clubs in Georgetown are young Indians who got money. They buy the big liquor, they buy the this, and they're able to buy the women too. And the men. They run things even in the dance. that we black people think is we cultural thing. You know? And that's why Explainer said, if we don't get wise, they will kick me out of the dance. Sparrow has another song that he said, we can break down the dance hall. But at the end of the day, if we don't have money, we're in trouble. And so we did it in the black community during the Black Power movement of the 60s and the 70s. We were able to develop a black consciousness that made us see the society where it is. The burden of uniting a society cannot be placed on one race. Two hands got to clap, right? And insofar as the other hand doesn't want to clap, what do you do? I'm not saying to abandon the national. I'm not saying to abandon the collective. All I'm saying, understand that the other groups and Amerindians are getting there. Amerindians are beginning to say, as Amerindians, how do we conceive of power in Guyana? And black people have to do that. Nothing is wrong with that. At some point, once we conceive of the power in ethnic terms, we will have to get together and pool. But we have to, Walter Rodney said in 1917, a little known, Ravi Dev is the person who drew my attention to that interview. And Walter Rodney said, a man has to be black today or Indian today so that tomorrow when he walks into a unity, he walks in as a conscious black man. They don't teach us that part of Rodney, or the Indians don't talk about that part of Rodney. Rodney was very clear. He was for multiracialism, but he felt that we had to develop our own separate consciousness. And then we pool that consciousness. You can't pool one side with consciousness and the other side without consciousness. That is a recipe for advantage taking. And the PPP is doing everything to stand in the way of black consciousness. That is why, as soon as I utter that we ought to buy from ourselves, they went in a frenzy. And they began to talk about black pudding. And I'm laughing at them because I wasn't talking about black pudding. I was talking about black people developing their own economy. So I laughed at them all who were saying that, the sister selling black pudding. That's not my interest. The sister can sell all black pudding they want. I was just giving an example in order to make a larger point. And it is the larger point that they're afraid of. So they don't put in the domain that what Hinds is talking about is economic self-reliance. They don't want you all to know that. So they put it on that I'm talking about black pudding. And I'm laughing because that's not what I was talking about. I'm talking about something much more fundamental that they're afraid of. And that is in an ethnically divided society. How do you move economically? You can't integrate your money when the other side is not integrating its money. If some young economists were to do a study of how much Indian money is spent in a black community and how much black money is spent in an Indian community, you will see the disparity. Countries talk about trade deficit. The Americans talk about the Chinese not buying American goods, but America buying Chinese goods, and trade deficit is bad. But think about that inside a society that is communally divided. There is a big trade deficit in the sense that black people spend more in Indian communities than Indian people spend in black communities. Part of it has to do with the economic slice of the pie, or the slice of the economic pie that black people have. We don't produce as many things that the Indians would want, and we have to up that. We have to close that trade deficit. But the PPP doesn't want us to engage in that conversation. So they're invoking the cyber bill to shut us up because they're saying When Hinds say that, he's dividing Guyana. I am not. Guyana's been divided long before I was born, and it will be divided after I die. The problem or the challenge for us is how within that context of division, we have some economic, cultural, and political equity and justice. So long as blacks only control 10% of the economic pie, Guyana is in trouble. Guyana is in trouble. And all I'm saying is how do we increase our share of the economic pie? One brother was arguing with me and say he's against. In fact, he wrote a letter to the Stabrook News saying my comments were insensitive and that he's against black self-sufficiency and black self-reliance. And he said that what we should do is that we should have more businesses in the black community. And I said to him, why one or the other? We have to do both. Because if black people spend their money in their own communities, it will increase the demand in the community. And then that will then lead to more businesses. If we stop spending our money on cassava in another community, it will increase the demand for cassava in our community. Am I still on, or because I'm hearing another voice there? Yeah. So the PPP does not want us to talk about a race-conscious society. They want us to continue to talk about this foolishness of colorblindness. And we cannot, if we are colorblind, then we are blind. And if we are blind, we can be walked over. So we are at a critical juncture, and black people have to make up their minds. Do they want to be black in a multiracial Guyana, or they just want to be Guyanese? You all have to make up your mind. The Indians have made up their minds, as the sister was pointing out in Trinidad and Tobago. The Indians have made up their minds that they want to be Indians. That is their root to Guyanese-ness. And we have to make up our minds as black people. We have to make up our minds. And we cannot allow the PPP, those of us who have a voice, we cannot allow the PPP to shut down. My column, which you all should read this past weekend, is that racist has become the new N-word in Guyana. Nobody calls us a nigger anymore. They call us racist. And racist mean nigger. They know that we do not believe in black superiority. Nobody, none of us has ever advocated that. In fact, black people are the least likely group to advocate superiority because we have been the victims of superiority. So they know that we are not racist. They know that we are race conscious, but not racist. They know that, but yet they insist in calling us racist. Not just those at the top, the average Indian sister and brother. As soon as they disagree with us, they say, oh, you're racist. Guyana is unique in the world in that regard. The word racist comes off the tongue of our Indian sisters and brothers like butter coming off a hot frying pan. They know that we're not racist, but it's their new way of calling us niggers. That's what is developing. And so long as we allow them to dictate how we talk about race, when we talk about race, they will always control us. And we have to call a spade a spade. We have to. Some of us are bearing the burden of being called racist. in the open space. One columnist this morning is angry with me because I went to spend Thanksgiving with my family and my mother, which he says in his thing. David Hinds spent Thanksgiving with the family and his mother, and telling African Guyanese that they must fight the government. So we've reached the point where we can't even spend time with our family. We are being attacked for that. As I said earlier, this business of us being outside Guyana, there are many of us outside, what they call outside Guyana, who are doing more than they are doing inside of Guyana. It's not where you are, it's what you do. And this whole nonsense, they don't make a distinction between overseas Indians and Indians who live in Guyana, but they're telling Black people that you all must not let them, Burke and Hinds and them who live outside, they shouldn't lead you all. That's what these Indian leaders or commentators are up to determine for us how we move. And we don't flood the newspapers with letters. You have to start doing that. Because anybody from Mars open the newspapers, they will see Indians telling Black people what to do, condemning Black people, but they don't see Black people pushing back. You will have to start writing letters in those newspapers. Because social media is playing a role, but your comments on social media are not going to be what somebody who's looking from the outside will look at first. You all got to start writing letters when they attack the leaders. Write and defend your leaders. It's an attitude change that we have to do. And, we are prepared to work. We are prepared to work. But you all have to be prepared to do your part. So that's my message.
Night and day are catching hell. People think I'm doing well just because I sing a few calypso. But that is my misery. Calypso don't make money, but most of them don't know that I have my axe to grind, just like any other man, existing in poverty and this giant ghetto land. But I intend to hang on. Tell them for me no dice. I ain't gonna eat lice. I ain't gonna grow old, sitting in the cold, not me. No way, they go have to beat me, they go have to eat me, or their heads go roll. Tell them I say, I was born in this land, I go die in this land, nobody go run me. From where me come from, nobody go run me, lad. Nobody go run me, nobody go run me, nobody go run me. Me mama must yam, me papa must yam, me woman must yam. Me pickly must yam. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me, lad. Nobody go run me. Life ain't much for us to choose. Some we win and some we lose. But sometimes life is so confusing. I had a lot of friends one time whom I used to wine and dine and gave them bread when they need it. Now most of them against me, take me, make the enemy, simply because I am not what they all want me to be. And with the political views I can't agree, but tell them for me no dice. I ain't gonna eat lice, I ain't gonna grow old, sitting in the cold, not me, Algie. No way, they gonna have to beat me, they gonna have to eat me, or the heads go roll. Tell them I say, I was born in this land, I go die in this land, nobody go run me. From where me come from, nobody go run me, nobody go run me, nobody go run me, nobody go run me. Me mama must yam,
Me papa must yam, me woman must yam, me picnic must yam. Nobody go run me, nobody go run me. Let go! 12 years I at CBC, work at Halcyon for free, when they went bankrupt and had no money. Because of my tolerance, they gave me the assurance the job belongs to me. But I hear some people high in our society, they don't like my calypso because they can't control me, so they plan to kick out my ass. Tell them, party no dice. I ain't gonna eat lice, I ain't gonna grow old, sitting in the cold, not me shorty. No way, all you have to beat me, all you have to bury me, more than 6 feet and more. Tell them I say, I was born in this land, I go die in this land, nobody go run me, from where me come from, nobody go run me, nobody go run me, nobody go run me, nobody go run me. Me mama must yam, me papa must yam, me woman must yam, me picnic must yam. Nobody go run me, nobody go run me. Election come and gone, some of them treat me with scorn, others put the whole point against me. Tell them I don't give a damn, I am going to sing my song exactly as I see it. Whoever want to make me a political enemy, who feel that they're playing God and could wreck me life for me, tell them I ain't running away. Tell them for me no dice. I ain't gonna eat lice, I ain't gonna grow old, sitting in the cold, not me shorty. No way, all you have to beat me, all you have to bury me, more than 6 feet and more. Tell them I say, I was born in this land, I go die in this land, nobody go run me, from where me come from, nobody go run me, nobody go run me, nobody go run me, lad, nobody go run me. Me mama must yam, me papa must yam, me woman must yam, me picnic must yam, lad, nobody go run me.
Yes, I'm on tonight. We're going to be talking with some lawyers. We have a lineup. I think Cameron Dranjutan, Darren Wade, Selwyn Peters. I am missing some Christopher Ram. Yes, they're all going to be weighing in on these charges against Minister Jordan and against Riff Burke. So that's my show tonight at 6:30 p.m. Guyana time.